Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be bringing you my top 10 reads of 2020 so far. These are just the books that I've read in 2020, not all of them necessarily came out in 2020, although some of them have. I really love this video. It's one of my favourite videos to film all year. I think it's a really interesting video to look back on at the end of the year to see how your reading changed over the second 6 months of the year. I'm always really sure when I do this video at the midway point in the year that not all of these books will be on my final top 10 list at the end of 2020. So it's really interesting to see which books move out of that list. So going from my 10th favourite all the way up to my favourite. Coming in at number 10, I have The Flat Chair by Beth O'Leary. This is a piece of contemporary women's fiction that follows two characters, Tiffy and Leon, who share a flat and in fact share a bed, but they are never in the flat at the same time. Leon works night shifts, he works in a hospital, and Tiffy works at a publisher's, and that was obviously a little touch that I really appreciate. They get to know each other through leaving post-it notes around the flat, and there is just so much sexual tension between these two characters. Basically, this whole book is you just waiting for them to bone. I do think there's a lot of elements to this book that don't necessarily make sense, that you do need to suspend your disbelief with, take with a pinch of salt, but it was just so much fun. Not only is there this really tense romance brewing between these two characters, but the author also deals with more serious topics. Tiffy is coming to terms with the fact that she was emotionally abused and manipulated by her ex-boyfriend. We also follow Leon's brother, who is falsely imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. And I thought those more serious elements to the story were balanced really well with the kind of fun, fluffy elements. I also read her second novel this year, The Switch, which I also really enjoyed, but I think this one just kind of got the edge over that one for me. Coming in at number 9, we have Wonderland by Juno Dawson. I think this is the third book I've read from Juno Dawson, but a lot of the books I've read from her are really her earlier work. This was the first book I read from the London trilogy of books that aren't like a trilogy, but they're kind of loosely linked and characters from one book pop up in another book. I knew I was gonna love this book just from the premise. This is a modern day Alice in Wonderland retelling where Alice is a teenage girl, she's a trans girl. She is part of this society that is so kind of alien to me. It's super rich teenagers. And when her friend, who is also a girl that she had a bit of a fling with, Bunny, goes missing, Alice is really worried about her, and it doesn't seem like any of the adults around are worried about her because Bunny disappears all of the time. Alice finds herself going to this really epic party called Wonderland because she just has a hunch that if she goes to Wonderland, she will find Bunny. What I thought was really incredible about this book was a lot of Alice's experiences ran true to me from things that trans friends have told me about their experiences. I think day-to-day aspects of what it is like to be a trans girl were incorporated into the story really well. Alice talks about having to regularly tuck herself. For the most part, Alice is really accepted for who she is, but that doesn't mean her life is without difficulties, that her experience isn't without difficulties. And I think that balance was struck really well. And also, just as someone who is a massive Alice fan, I loved all the little references to the original stories. A lot of them are quite heavy-handed, and I think that could bother some people, but I just loved them. I loved, even though it was very obvious what characters were the counterparts for the original story, I still felt really clever when I figured out who was who. Next I have Tender by Belinda McKeown. This is a work of Irish literature that I read back for the Irish Readathon, and it's such a kind of overdone comparison now, but I do think if you like Normal People, you will probably like Tender because it is also about a really messy friendship. We follow two characters, a boy and a girl, and the bond that forms between them when they are teenagers and young adults. The intensity of that bond, how they fail to communicate how they properly feel to one another. It's set in the 90s in Ireland. It has that kind of college atmosphere to it, so that's kind of the Normal People link there. But this book also has a lot to do with the gay experience in Ireland in the 90s, which was something that I really appreciated seeing depicted in a novel. It's a really heartfelt, and as the title says, It's a really tender novel. I don't hear too many people talking about it, and I would love for more people to read this one. Next, I have the only non-fiction book on this list, and that is Don't Touch My Hair by Emma DeBerry. This is also a book that I read for the Irish Readathon. It's a non-fiction book all about the history of black hair, the cultural significance, the historical significance, contemporary struggles of people who have black hair, how people with black hair face prejudice because of it. Emma DeBerry both draws on her own personal experiences, but also has done a phenomenal amount of research, and I think this book is super informative if you want to learn more about this element of black culture. And because Emma DeBerry is Irish, she brought that sort of angle to it, which is something that I found really great about the book. Coming in at the halfway point at number 5, we have The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. This is a YA book that is told in verse, which is one of my absolute favourite methods of storytelling in YA literature, and you will see that again later on in this video. In this book, we follow our main character from his childhood through his teenage years and as he goes off to college, and it's an exploration of his understanding of his sexuality and his gender, how he experiments. It's also about his relationship with his parents and his heritage. Something I really loved about this book, which I also loved about Wonderland, was it wasn't a tragic gay book. It wasn't a book that just depicted all of the horrible things that can happen to you when you are queer, but equally it didn't shy away from incorporating some of those elements. I really love the mixed mediums in this book, so there are little snippets of text conversations. The book is laid out so it's as if the main character has torn pages from his notebook and put them in the book. I loved seeing this character blossom and come to an understanding and acceptance of themselves, especially as they began to dabble in drag and become more comfortable in that. It's a book that is getting a lot of praise at the moment, and it is so well deserved. Next, I have Summer Water by Sarah Moss. This one actually doesn't come out till August, so I feel like I'm cheating. But I am such a big Sarah Moss fan that I just could not resist. This is set on the longest day of the year and is set in Scotland. And while it's the longest day of the year, it is also pouring with rain. And we follow 12 people who are stuck cooped up in this Scottish cabin park, which I thought was a really interesting situation to put all of these people in. And I think reading this during like lockdown was also a really fascinating reading experience, because like we're all kind of cooped up at the moment. In many ways, the chapters of this book can read like short stories as you step into the mind of a different one of these 12 characters and see what they are grappling with in their own lives, see how they perceive the other people that are in the cabin park. This book deals a lot with prejudice and Brexit. Sarah Moss is incredible at incorporating political aspects into fiction without it feeling like they're being forced or she is spoon feeding you her opinion. It doesn't feel like that at all. She just writes people so acutely and accurately. And the sex scene in this book is one of the best sex scenes I've ever read. And I don't mean in like a steamy way. I mean in that it's like accurate and honest about what it's like for someone who's caught up in their own head when they should be enjoying something. I will just read everything that Sarah Moss writes. I think she is incredible. I told you there would be another YA book in verse. Next on my list I have Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. Brand new auto by author for me. I just love her writing so much. I read another one of her books, With the Fire on High, this year as well, and I did prefer Clap When You Land just a bit, and I'm really excited to read her earlier novel, The Poet X, which is also written in verse. But anyway, we're talking about Clap When You Land. This book is told from alternating perspectives from two sisters that don't know they are sisters. So one of them lives in, I think it's New York, and the other one lives in Dominican Republic. They don't know that each other exists. They only find out they are sisters when their dad dies in a plane crash when he is going to visit the daughter in Dominican Republic. I say visit, he essentially lives like a double life where he goes between his two families. Not only was this an incredible book about sisterhood and forming bonds and female friendship, but I also found a particularly personal connection with these two girls experiencing grief. They are a little bit younger than I was when I lost my dad, but I really related to their grief and their confusion and how difficult it is when a pillar of certainty just isn't around anymore. There were also LGBTQ plus elements to this book that I thought were really fantastic, and Elizabeth Acevedo's command of language is just so powerful. Her word choice is so delicate and she always just pinpoints the exact perfect phrase for what she's trying to convey. If you haven't read any of her books before, I cannot recommend her enough. Next on this list I have Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. In this book we follow Dana, who is an aspiring writer in the 1970s. and she is then transported back to 1815, where she is assumed to be a slave. And gradually Dana comes to realise that the reason she's being transported back is because she has to protect a young white boy who is one of her ancestors. Because of this, Dana ends up in extremely dangerous situations, but also very morally complex situations. Situations where she may be entirely against what this little boy is doing, and as he grows into an older man, but she has to protect him, because if he doesn't survive, she won't ever have existed. It's a book about race and gender and power dynamic. It's a really page-turning novel. This book gives you so much to think about. It's a book that you will not forget. I was a little reluctant to pick it up because I'm really not into sci-fi and like time travel, but it was just utterly phenomenal. I have not heard a single person talk about this book that didn't think it was incredible. My second favourite book of the year so far is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. This was another book that I felt fairly certain I was going to love it going into it. Also, can we talk about these sprayed edges, because they're stunning. In this book we follow 25-year-old Amira, who is a babysitter, and one night when she is on a night out with her friends, she gets a phone call from the child who babysits mother. She is asking if Amira can just get the kid out of the house. So Amira takes her to a supermarket, just kind of hangs out with her there for a bit, and then a security guard and a white woman come over to Amira, suspecting that she has kidnapped this child that is in her care. This incident is filmed and events kind of spiral on from that moment. The mother of this child, so Amira's employer, is a like feminist blogger who seems like she does have good intentions, but doesn't work out like that. Firstly, something I loved about this book was, I think she's called Briar, the little girl. She is fantastically written, and you can tell that the author herself has spent a lot of time with children of this age, because she just feels like so real, and I think it's really difficult to get a child character perfect. Amira is also a character that you really root for. I feel a lot of sympathy towards her. I kind of just want to sit down, give her a hug, have a chat with her, and then also go on a night out with her. All of these characters are really morally complex. Like, everyone is very nuanced, and that's something that I really love in literature. I hate when there's kind of just like, this is the good guy and this is the bad guy. Like, everyone in this book is complex and flawed and does some good things and some bad things. Ultimately, this book is an exploration of power imbalances, the relationship between employers and staff, and also just the confusion of being in your mid-20s. I think this book is really great, and if you have any thoughts on it, I would love to have a chat in the comments, because I want to talk to more people about this book. And finally, my absolute favourite book of 2020 so far is Promising Young Women by Caroline O'Donoghue. Again, this was one that I really felt like I would love when I went into it. Like Such a Fun Age, it is about a young woman in her mid-20s who is kind of just like figuring her shit out. We follow Jane in the aftermath of a really difficult breakup and her grappling with feelings surrounding that. And then we follow her as she enters into an affair with an older man who is more senior than her at work. How initially she feels kind of empowered and in charge of the situation, but gradually he chips away at her sense of security and self-esteem, and it really badly impacts her both personally and professionally. You really follow the web that he weaves around her to ensure that even if she does speak up about what is going on, and even if she is believed, it will not work out well for her. It's so sharply written, so honestly written. I don't think I've ever underlined so much in a book before. There were so many moments in this book where the author just brilliantly articulated something I've never been able to put into words before. How damaging it can be to be someone's dirty little secret, how you can spiral out of control and stop taking care of yourself. It was such a brutally honest portrayal of all of those things. All of the characters in this book felt so real and genuine to me. I think young Irish female writers are having such an important moment. I think so many of the most incredible contemporary books out there are being written by young Irish women, and this is definitely amongst them. I loved this book just so much. It's so dear to my heart, and it's one again that I haven't heard loads of people talking about, and I would love to have a chat with you if you've read this one. So here's a stack of 5 out of the top 10 books that I read in 2020. One of them I don't have with me, one of them I got from the library, some of them I was sent for review from NetGalley. But do leave me a comment down below and let me know if you've read any of the books that I spoke about, or let me know what your favourite read of 2020 so far is. I hope you're staying safe and well. I hope you are reading an excellent book at the moment, and I will talk to you in my next video.